It seems Nkandla and money back to haunt the former president. You may remember at the time when Jacob Zuma was facing questions about how he paid for his home and alterations. He mentioned family, but then he mentioned that he had a bond. It emerged it was with VBS Bank. That bond was issued around 2016. Well, today, in the daily Maverick publication, journalist Pauli van Wyk says the bank can now seize 6.5 million rand of his assets to pay back that bond. You'll remember, of course, VBS was essentially looted. It collapsed. It was under curatorship and then liquidated. Pauli van Wyk joins us now. So, Pauli, just remind us very quickly about the bond that was issued to the former president, and take us quite quickly through a couple of really key events in 2018, starting with when the president stopped being our president, February 2018.
Yes, he stepped down on that Valentine's night, Sally, and then in March that same year, VBS Mutual Bank was put under curatorship, which means that the money flows that flowed out of the bank illicitly stopped as well. And remember that loans were given out at VBS Mutual Bank actually as gifts and as bribes to certain people. Now, in August that year, the installments that former President Jacob Zuma made every month into this bond stopped. So it seems as if we can derive that his political power equaled money coming in, because at the time his power was cut, he couldn't pay his bonds anymore, and we know that that bond was given to him under suspicious circumstances. It seemed very clear that he couldn't pay that large amount of bond on what he earned per year.
All right, so when VBS was then liquidated in 2018, things started to be wrapped up. So talk to us about what happened in the High Court in Pietermaritzburg today, because I understand this is the action of the liquidators of VBS, am I right?
Yes, absolutely. So when the bank was taken over by Anuj Rupal as the curator, he started rounding up the money, and he started doing the same that he's been doing now, trying to recoup the money from former President Jacob Zuma with other people as well. So in last year, he already submitted papers to court in an attempt at getting the Zuma money back. Today, the court in High Court in Pietermaritzburg granted the order and said that all realizable assets of Mr. Zuma can be taken. It's important here that the house or the property itself cannot be seized and sold, because that stands on Ingonyama Trust land, and the land cannot be taken away from the trust. So any other movable assets now belongs to the curator until the debt of around 6.5 million rand has been paid.
So what's likely to happen now, Pauli? Because I mean, you and I were chatting before we went to air. Imagine who's going to walk up to the gates of Nkandla saying, we've come to seize your furniture. Is this realistically going to happen? What's the next step?
Well, it should happen, and if anyone has any regard for the law, which I do feel that Anuj Rupal is that kind of guy, someone needs to rock up there and say, we're going to take some assets. It is very interesting, though, and I would be interested to see if there are any real assets left by the time Anuj comes there, because this also gives anyone the chance to remove assets that's on Nkandla at the farm. But in essence, the cattle, the furniture, anything that can be sold is now fair game.
Could the former president challenge today's order?
No, it was a default judgment, and therefore it would be close to impossible for him to challenge it now belatedly. Default judgment means that he didn't partake in the court proceedings, and therefore default judgment was given against him.
It struck me while I was watching the chaos in Parliament today that the EFF, their heyday really in terms of parliamentary disruptions, really powerful moments was when they started chanting to President Zuma at the time, pay back the money, pay back the money. And of course, some money was paid back to the state, but that was just for the upgrades. So just talk to me about what this relates just to the bond, am I right?
Yes, this relates to the bond, right? So this has its root in Advocate Thuli Madonsela, the former public protector's report, Secure in Comfort, where she found that certain upgrades to Nkandla were non-security upgrades. Now, those upgrades were things like the swimming pool that turned into a fire pool thanks to Nathi Nhleko, and the chicken coop and the amphitheater, things that had nothing to do with security. So Zuma had to pay back the money for that. So it was around 8 million rand, if I remember correctly. And taking out the bond, the money was then sent to the Reserve Bank, and that's when the public heard, okay, so the Zuma debt has been cancelled. Now it's been paid. But then Zuma still owed VBS Mutual Bank, and when he stopped paying those installments, now we are here where there was order against him.
While we're on VBS, I mean, so much money was plundered from the bank. Only one person is behind bars. What about everyone else?
Yeah, that's a good question. So we know that the management of the bank, in essence, stole the bank into insolvency. And to hide that secret, they recruited all sorts of politicians and business people outside of the bank, to who they also gave money, on the one hand, to keep the secret, but on the other hand, gave money in order to get more money from state-owned enterprises into the bank. That was the essence of the scheme. So those main people are people like the bank chief, Tafiwa Matotsi, or the CFO, Philip Tritter, who is now the only one behind bars, after he is the only one pleading guilty. The rest of them, like PIC directors Ernest Nasani and Paul Magula, are all pleaded not guilty. The interesting person that's also under the accused is Danny Msizo, who is, of course, the current president, Cyril Ramaphosa's main guy in Limpopo, who is heading and spearheading his re-election campaign in Limpopo, which obviously is quite questionable. The other people that we know received money from VBS is ANC-linked business people like Kabelo Matsepe, EFF politicians, Julius Malema and Floyd Shivambu, and certain municipal managers right around the country.
It's interesting because, and I know you weren't able to watch the session, but Julius Malema, Floyd Shivambu, very active today, demanding accountability from President Cyril Ramaphosa. His response, let's not call it an answer, where he said, I stand ready to answer all your questions, but I've been advised to stay out of this. The law must take its course. Do you find it ironic that the EFF is pushing the president? Do you think that they too should be more answerable? It just seems you point a finger and there's three pointing back at you sort of situation.
Yes, of course. And the EFF had done really good work with President Jacob Zuma, holding him to account. It's only, and unfortunately later, that we realized that right around the same time where they were chanting pay back the money at former President Jacob Zuma, they were also really complicit in stealing money from VBS Mutual Bank and then spending it on their personal lifestyles and their political party. So now with hindsight, we know that way back it was already extremely ironic. And at the current situation, it's just unthinkable that they're allowed in the first place to keep up with it. I'm not sure how it is that Parliament did not sanction any of the MPs involved, and I think it's only them, Julius Malema and Floyd Shivambu, who are involved as MPs in VBS. And I'm not sure how it is that the Hawks and the prosecuting authority seem to not want to go there. It's questionable conduct from our authorities, I would say.
It is an interesting question around President Ramaphosa that he's not answering. Do you see it as problematic, Pauli? Because transparency is so important. And actually, I think it was Julius Malema who made such a good point, and he said, we've been grilled in Parliament for not holding people to account. We're trying to hold the President to account. He won't answer our questions. Do you think the President has taken the wrong tack?
Personally, I would always be on the side of the fact shining, the light shining on the facts. And this is one of those occasions where I do suspect that the President could have done way better in airing the situation, taking the country into his confidence, showing us what happened at Phala, and ensuring that we know that he is not guilty as he claims. Because at the moment, we should only take him at his word, Sally. And I'm sorry, but the ANC doesn't have that track record. We can take them on their word. At the moment, it's really questionable how any of them are actually still in the governing party. So I find it problematic, and it's not a good day for democracy if our current president in Parliament takes attack from his predecessor. It's not acceptable.
Yeah. Thank you so much for chatting to us this evening. Much appreciated. That is investigative journalist with Daily Maverick, Pauli van Wyk.